Comprehensive Information Theory, or CIT, holds the position that all material entities are information. Some people have found that idea somewhat controversial or unacceptable. One possible cause for that reaction is not fully understanding what that idea means in CIT. For instance, it would be an error to think that the statement, all material entities are information, implies that mass and energy alone are information. This presentation will provide one brief example that illustrates CIT's notion that all material entities are information. But first let me state the following. The notion that all material entities are information is revealing and useful, but it is not essential for most of CIT. Let me repeat that. CIT contains much that does not depend on the concept that all material entities are information. As such, you are not obligated to embrace that idea, and I am certainly not dogmatic about pushing it. That being stated, the notion that all material entities are information should not be dismissed too lightly, since its significance and implications reach much further than meets the eye. As discussed in the full CIT work, the general idea that everything is information has been around for many years. That idea has been expressed in different formulations by prominent scientists, some of which I will mention in the next slide. Therefore, even if you do not wholly embrace the idea, at least try to keep it in mind. Okay, let's get started. The general idea that everything is information is not new. Everything is information is a notion that has been expressed in different ways by many prominent thinkers of the past and present. Among these was American scientist David Bohm, German computer engineer Konrad Zuse, German physicist Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, American physicist John Wheeler. Wheeler wrote, "Every particle, every field of force, even the space-time continuum itself, all things physical are information theoretic in origin." Others include British physicist and Nobel laureate Roger Penrose, English physicist Paul Davies, American physicist Seth Lloyd, and Serbian physicist Vlatko Vedral. Vedral wrote, "Information is the building block on which everything is constructed. Information is far more fundamental than matter or energy. Our reality is ultimately made up of information." In summary, each of these individuals held some view of the notion that everything in our universe is information. CIT expresses that same general idea in a unique way, different from all other views, but with a few overlapping features. The similarities and differences will become apparent as more of CIT is revealed. Before continuing, let's provide one quick informal example that sketches the idea that every material entity is information. Let me emphasize that this example is only suggestive, and is from one perspective. It is not a rigorous formal proof. Let's begin with the following. On page 125 of his book, No Free Lunch, William Dembski quotes Robert Stalnaker on information. That quote reads as follows: "To learn something, to acquire information, is to rule out possibilities." CIT agrees with the essence of that statement about information. The essence is that information indicates what is, and excludes what is not. With that thought in mind, let's proceed to sketch the picture. A person enters a room. In the center of the room there is a wooden table. Does the person acquire information when they perceive the table? Yes, undoubtedly yes. The visual signals from the table provided the person with information on the shape, size, dimensions, color, location, and many other attributes about the table. That information gives the table a unique identity, thereby distinguishing that table from all other material entities in the universe. Thus, in the sense presented earlier, that table rules out all other possible material entities that could be occupying that space, at that time. In short, by merely existing in its physical form, that table rules out innumerable other possibilities. Hence, as a material entity the table is informative. It is information. The same may be said of any other material entity, anywhere, at any time. Let's proceed. A key concept in comprehensive information theory is that of a mass energy configuration, or MEC. Respectively, in MEC, the M represents mass, the E represents energy, and the C represents configuration. A configuration is a spatial temporal arrangement, or distribution, of the mass and energy. In other words, a MEC is mass and energy that is configured in space and time. From this definition, it is clear that every material entity is a MEC, and every MEC is a material entity. That is true at all scales, from the atomic and molecular scale, to our everyday world, to the astronomical scale of planets and galaxies. Summarizing, every material entity is an MEC, namely, mass and energy, configured in space, existing in time. For this example, we will use the visual aid that appears below. Here, each black round object represents a single ink molecule. We have a container with 16 ink molecules inside. At any given moment in time, those 16 molecules are in a specific configuration. That is always true. All material entities are always in a specific location and configuration. Here's a question. As the 16 molecules are configured, are they information? We begin with a container holding 16 ink molecules. The 16 molecules are initially in what we will call configuration number 1. We had asked the question, is configuration number 1 information? We will return to that question later. Let's now use those 16 molecules to write the name of a household pet that barks, and is called man's best friend. To do this, we use the original mass and energy and simply change the position of the molecules, from configuration number 1, to configuration number 2. The animation that follows will do this. Is configuration number 2 information? Compare configuration number 1 with configuration number 2. Suppose that instead of changing the position of the 16 molecules from configuration number 1 to configuration number 2, we put the 16 molecules in the other configuration shown on this slide. The original 16 molecules are shown here in 5 different configurations. Are any of these configurations information? Let's look deeper at what we have. We had to use the 16 molecules to write the name of a household pet that barks, and is called man's best friend. Does the original configuration of the 16 molecules accomplish that? What about when the 16 molecules in configuration number 1 are changed to configuration number 2? Configuration number 3. Configuration number 4. Configuration number 5. Let's look again at the 5 configurations. Are any of those 5 MECs information? This slide will help to answer the question. Let's consider each of the 5 configurations. In the United States, the word dog is written as MEC number 2. In the Philippines, dog is written as MEC number 3. In Japan, dog is written as MEC number 4. In Vulcan, dog is written as MEC number 5. Finally, in a language called Randamese, dog is written as MEC number 1. Therefore, the answer to the question is represented in a different language by every MEC. In the appropriate context, those answers are certainly information. Okay, so at least for the moment we'll entertain the idea that any MEC can be information. Does that imply that any MEC actually is information? In this example, we observed how the same 16 molecules, in different configurations, became information within a context. The same concept can be extended indefinitely. For example, we can construct a modified Morse code, as shown here, in which the 16 molecules convey the word dog within that context. Any other configuration of the 16 molecules could also be agreed upon to represent the word dog. The generalization of this idea is straightforward. The number or configuration of the molecules is not what determine the status as information. Let's expand and emphasize this crucial point. Instead of 16 ink molecules, it could have been 100, or 100 billion. Instead of ink molecules, it could have been grains of sand, seashells, or any other material objects. Finally, instead of the 11 configurations that were displayed, it could have been any other configuration. That is part of the reason why the same message may be conveyed in countless different ways. The bottom line is that every material entity, every MEC, will manifest as some type of information when it interacts with another material entity. Thus, the key isn't whether or not the material entity is information. The key is whether or not the material entity is information of the type, and in the form, that is needed to perform a function within a specific context. In the final slide we'll go into this a bit more, and say a few other things. Summarizing, we illustrated how 11 different configurations of the same molecules all convey information. Just as we've agreed that MEC number 2 conveyed dog, nothing prevents us from agreeing that MEC number 8 also conveys dog. That idea generalizes to the conclusion that, in a given context, all material entities are information. Beyond what has been shown here, are there other reasons supporting the position that all material entities are information? Yes, there are. Key among those other reasons is that all material entities possess the most important attribute of information, namely, that information transforms entities. One of the ways that information may transform an entity is by informing. In our example, the word dog was informative, since it answered the question about a household pet that barks and is called man's best friend. Let's emphasize this feature about all information. The capacity to transform other entities is the single most important attribute of any type of information. Information always transforms an entity, whether the entity is natural or technological. Thus, we restate that the relevant question isn't if a material entity is, or is not, information. The relevant question is whether, in a given context, the material entity manifests as the type and form of information that is desired, or needed, to fulfill a function or purpose. That is the main reason why, in CIT, information is not something that is, but rather something that becomes. We'll end this presentation with that provocative statement. Other aspects of the claim that all material entities, all MECs, are information, are explored in other videos.